Revenge office stories. My manager publicly humiliated me. She reassigned my passion project to an intern and smiled while she did it. A tight, corporate smile that didn't reach her eyes. You know the one. She might as well have been announcing a minor budget cut, not gutting my professional life in front of everyone I worked with. She thought I'd just take it. She thought I'd be the good, quiet soldier I'd always been, nodding along and offering to support the transition. They were wrong. They had fundamentally misunderstood who they were dealing with. This is the story of how I used a single, silent command to turn their triumphant sprint review into a fiery, career-ending disaster. This is the story of how I engineered my boss's downfall. In software development, there are people who write code, and then there are people who build worlds. For 10 years, I'd prided myself on being a world builder. At 35, I was a senior engineer at Innovatech, a company whose ambition always seemed a step ahead of its market share. I wasn't the loudest person in the room. I was the one they called after the shouting was over and something was actually broken. I was reliable. I was thorough. And for the past 2 years, I had poured every ounce of that reliability, every spare thought, into a single project. My project. I called it Chimera. Chimera wasn't just another app. It was designed to be our titan, our magnum opus. Calling it a predictive analytics engine is like calling a spaceship a vehicle. It's criminally insufficient. I designed it to be a living, breathing digital nervous system for our clients. Imagine seeing into your market's future, not with a crystal ball, but with cold, hard data, processed by an AI so sophisticated it could spot the whisper of a trend before it became a roar. It could predict supply chain disruptions from a flicker of geopolitical tension or flag potential fraud before a single dollar went missing. It was the kind of tech that turns a mid-tier company like Innovatech into a legend. It was my baby. I was its mother, father, and attending physician. I wrote the first line of code on a rainy Saturday, fueled by coffee and ambition. I architected its sprawling infrastructure on lunch break napkins. I spent countless nights training its AI models on datasets so massive they made our servers weep, coaxing them from baby algorithms into something that felt damn near prescient. My colleagues saw the light on in my office late at night and just shook their heads. They saw obsession, I saw creation. This wasn't just code. It was a piece of my soul, meticulously crafted and ready to change the game. And the company knew it. Our biggest potential client, a multi-billion-dollar logistics firm, made it clear their next-generation contract hinged on a successful demo of Chimera. The deal was worth hundreds of millions. It was the company's golden ticket. But every Eden has its serpent. Ours was named Brenda. Brenda was my manager, a recent hire from some flashy marketing firm. She was a master of the corporate dialect, fluent in buzzwords like synergy, paradigm shift, and agile transformation. She could give a 40-minute presentation containing zero verifiable information and leave executives nodding in agreement. She managed by spreadsheet and by instinct, and her instinct told her the engineering team was a bunch of greasy-fingered troglodytes who needed her strategic mind. Code to her was a pesky, inconvenient necessity that stood between her brilliant vision and market domination. She particularly disliked me. I wasn't defiant, but I wouldn't kowtow. When she'd make a technically impossible demand, I wouldn't just say yes. I would calmly explain the laws of digital physics or the temporal paradox of her requested deadlines. I wasn't being difficult. I was being realistic. To Brenda, this was insubordination. She saw my competence not as an asset, but as a challenge to her authority. And deep inside Chimera, I had an insurance policy. It wasn't malicious, not at first. It was just a consequence of my intimate knowledge of the system. The core of Chimera's predictive power was a proprietary data normalization module I'd built from scratch. I called it the Rosetta Stone. Chimera ingested data from dozens of incompatible sources, a chaotic digital babel. My Rosetta Stone module was the only thing that could translate that chaos into a single, coherent language the AI could understand. It was intricate, elegant, and its documentation was, let's say, intentionally minimalist. It existed perfectly in my head, but on paper it was a black box. It was my signature on the soul of the machine. I never thought of it as a weapon, but I slept better knowing I was the only one in the world who truly held the key. The execution took place on a Tuesday morning at our quarterly all-hands meeting. The big conference room was packed, the air stale with cheap coffee and nervous energy. After the CEO's rah-rah speech, Brenda took the stage. She strode to the podium wearing a painfully bright blazer, a splash of arrogant color in a sea of developer-gray hoodies. A slide appeared behind her with a single word, acceleration. "Good morning, Innovatech," she began. "We stand at a moment of incredible opportunity. Project Chimera is on the verge of completion." She paused for effect. I felt a small, unfamiliar flicker of pride. She was talking about my work. "But," she continued, and the word hung in the air like an axe, "in the spirit of agility and fostering new talent, we need to think differently. We need to democratize our development process to carry this project over the finish line." My hands went cold. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I knew with a sudden, sickening certainty what was coming. This wasn't about the project. This was about me. "For the final pre-launch phase," she announced, "I have decided to hand over the reins. I want to empower our next generation of innovators. So, I'm incredibly excited to announce that the lead on this final sprint will be our newest team member, Leo." She gestured to the side of the stage. A kid stood up looking terrified. He couldn't have been more than 21. It was Leo. He'd started 3 weeks ago. I'd helped him set up his development environment. He was smart, earnest, and knew approximately zero about the architecture of a multi-petabyte predictive analytics engine. The room fell into a deep, uncomfortable silence. Every engineer knew what this was. This wasn't empowering new talent. It was a public, humiliating slap in the face. My project, my 2 years of blood and sweat, my chimera was being taken from me and handed to a kid as a learning exercise. I could feel my colleagues' eyes on me, not with judgment but with pity, and pity was so much worse. I stared straight ahead, my vision blurring. I focused on Brenda's face, beaming with a smug, self-satisfied glow. She'd put the quiet, competent woman in her place. She glanced at me, a fleeting, triumphant smirk playing on her lips. The CEO, bless his non-technical heart, started clapping. The room followed with the hesitant applause you hear at a funeral. I felt nothing. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, and the person who caused it was smiling for the cameras. After the meeting, the final indignity, Brenda cornered me by the coffee machine. "I'm going to need you to do a full knowledge transfer to Leo," she said, her tone breezy. "We want this to be a seamless transition. Just get him up to speed on everything." Everything. 2 years of my life. I was supposed to just pour that into a 21-year-old's brain in an afternoon. "Okay," I said. The word came out flat, devoid of emotion. She patted my arm. "Great. Let's be team players on this." As I walked back to my desk, the numbness gave way to something hot and sharp. A quiet, surgical rage. She hadn't just reassigned my project. She tried to erase me from its story. She had underestimated me. She had made a critical, career-ending mistake. She just didn't know it yet. My first instinct was primal. I wanted to burn it all down. Delete the repositories, corrupt the databases, leave nothing but digital ash. But that was clumsy, the act of a cornered animal. My revenge had to be elegant, surgical. It had to be a reflection of the very system they had taken from me. Complex, subtle, and devastatingly effective. I had to reframe my thinking. This wasn't just petty revenge. It was a necessary course correction. Brenda's incompetence wasn't just an insult. It was a clear and present danger to the company. She was a pilot who didn't know how to fly, and she had just grabbed the controls of our most valuable aircraft. My plan, therefore, wasn't sabotage. It was an educational exercise, a live demonstration of cause and effect. This internal justification was crucial. It cooled my rage, sharpening it from a blunt instrument into a scalpel. I was no longer a victim seeking vengeance. I was a ghost in the machine preparing to balance the scales. The knowledge transfer sessions with Leo were a painful farce. He was like a golden retriever, eager, energetic, and completely incapable of understanding the task. I tried to explain the Byzantine logic of the Rosetta Stone module, and his eyes would glaze over. He'd ask questions like, "Can't we just use a standard JSON parser?" It was like asking a master watchmaker why he doesn't just use a sundial. Brenda, of course, was CC'd on every summary email. "Leo is getting up to speed remarkably fast," she'd reply. "Great collaboration, team." I watched this exchange with a kind of detached horror. She wasn't just ignorant. She was proudly, willfully ignorant. Then I saw my opening. Brenda had decided Chimera's UI looked dated. She'd read a blog post about a new, flashy JavaScript framework called Nova.js and decreed it must be used. Leo, eager to please, was tasked with ripping out my stable, functional UI and replacing it with this new, untested garbage. I watched their commits in the repository like a hawk. I saw them struggling to make the new UI talk to Chimera's backend, and they couldn't figure out my Rosetta Stone module. So they did what inexperienced developers always do when faced with a complex problem. They went around it. I saw the commit that was their death warrant. The message was refactor, bypassing legacy normalization for direct data ingestion with Nova.js parser. They'd done it. They had unplugged the brain and tried to wire the nerves directly to the eyeballs. They'd removed the one component that translated digital chaos into mathematical sense. Brenda herself approved the pull request with a single damning comment. "Excellent. Much cleaner." My heart didn't pound. It went still. They had just handed me the loaded gun. All I had to do was pull the trigger. That night, in the ghost town of the office, I logged in. I navigated to the data ingestion pipeline they had so carelessly butchered. I wasn't going to delete anything. Deleting is for amateurs. I was going to add something. I wrote a single, innocuous-looking function, pre-computation health check. It was a masterpiece of passive aggression. The function had one simple job. Before any major calculation, it checked the incoming data stream for the signature of my Rosetta Stone module. If the signature was present, it did nothing. Business as usual. But if the signature was missing, if it detected raw, untranslated data, it triggered a hidden payload. It wouldn't crash. That was too obvious. Instead, my function would silently allow the corrupted, nonsensical data to flow into the system's memory. But as it did so, it would perform one tiny, malicious transformation. It would scan for any numerical value and replace it with a specific, catastrophic value. Nan. Not a number. To the naked eye, and to their flashy new UI, everything would look perfect. The data tables would populate. The logs would show success. It was a perfect illusion of a working system. But the moment, the very second, anyone tried to perform a mathematical operation on that data, the NaN values would act like a virus. Any number added to NaN is NaN. It would create a cascading failure of logic, a chain reaction of mathematical impossibilities that would rip the application apart from the inside out. I wrapped my new function in perfectly reasonable comments about ensuring data integrity. I committed the code with the most boring message I could conjure. Feature, add pre-computation health check for data integrity. I pushed it to the main branch. The trap was set. For the next week, I played the supportive team member, answering Leo's questions with a serene smile while watching them walk deeper into the trap. The sprint review was in 3 days. Judgment was coming. The day of the sprint review arrived. The big boardroom was staged for a triumph. The VP of product, a man named David whose smile was directly tied to the company's stock price, was there. Next to him sat two serious-looking execs from the logistics firm, our golden ticket client. Brenda was in her element, wearing a power blazer the shade of blood red. She shot me a quick, dismissive glance that said, "See, we didn't need you after all." I offered her a small, tight smile in return. Leo, looking pale, was at the podium. After a few boilerplate slides, the demo began. The screen flickered to life with their new UI. It was all bright colors and swooping animations like a casino website. "As you can see," Leo began, his voice trembling slightly, "we've implemented a full front-end refresh." He clicked through a few static pages. So far, so good. The house of cards was standing. "And now," Leo said, his confidence growing, "let's ingest some live market data and run a predictive analysis." This was it. My eyes were locked on the screen. He clicked Ingest Live Data. A progress bar zipped across the screen. Behind the scenes, my health check function awoke, found the raw data stream, and silently began replacing every critical number with the ticking time bomb of NaN. To everyone else, the screen populated with clean-looking tables. A success. Leo smiled, genuinely proud. Data ingestion complete. Brenda shot me another smug look. I met her gaze, my expression a perfect mask of calm. "Now," Leo said, moving his cursor to the most important button on the screen, "Generate forecast. Let's see the future." He clicked it. For a single, beautiful second, nothing happened. Then, the symphony of chaos began. The elegant line graph on the screen, meant to show a smooth curve, shot vertically off the chart, then tore through the bottom of its own axis, twisting into a scribble of digital anguish. The numbers in the data tables flickered, then all at once, they were replaced by a single, damning symbol. Infinity. Infinity. A sea of infinite failure. The UI components began to rebel, overlapping and resizing randomly. Then a small pop-up appeared. Fatal underscore UNCUGHT_exception. Divide underscore BY underscore. Then another, and another. Hundreds of them flooded the screen in a torrent of failure, a waterfall of digital death. The application froze, glitched, and with a final, pathetic shudder, it crashed to the desktop. All that was left on the giant screen was the serene blue background of the operating system. It looked like a tombstone. A profound, absolute silence fell on the room. The client executives stared at the blank screen, their faces utterly unreadable, somehow more terrifying than anger. David, the VP, had his mouth slightly open, his smile frozen into a rictus of horror. And Brenda, oh Brenda, the smug confidence drained from her face, replaced by a wave of confusion, then denial, then pure, undiluted panic. Her skin went pale against her blood-red blazer. What was that?" she whispered at Leo. "Refresh it. Just restart it." Leo's hands flew across the keyboard. He clicked the icon. Crash. He tried again. Crash. And again. Crash. It was well and truly broken. David, the VP, finally broke the silence. He turned his head slowly to face Brenda. His voice was dangerously quiet. "Brenda, you told me it was rock solid. What is going on?" Brenda's mouth opened and closed like a fish. It must be a network glitch, a projection error. It was working perfectly in staging. She was grasping at straws, spewing technical jargon she didn't understand. It didn't work. The clients were already gathering their papers, their faces grim masks of disappointment. The show was over. The aftermath was pure chaos. The meeting fractured. The clients left without a word, their stony silence a verdict more damning than any angry outburst. The multi-million-dollar deal didn't just go cold, it evaporated. David, the VP, cornered Brenda and a ghost-white Leo. "My office. Now." The door slammed, but not before we could hear the low, furious growl of a man watching a 9-figure contract burn to the ground. Then the inevitable summons. My desk phone rang. David needs to see you in the main conference room. He needs you to look at Chimera. I walked in with a practiced expression of concern. David was pacing. Brenda was sitting at the table, staring into space. Leo was hunched over the laptop, still trying to revive the dead app. "Tell me what happened," David said, his voice raw. "No excuses. What broke?" I sat down. I feigned surprise at the crash logs. I typed a few commands. "Let's look at the state of the system right before the crash," I said, my tone calm and analytical. I brought up the memory dump. The screen filled with data, and there it was, plain as day. The data streams were riddled with NaN. "Well, there's your problem," I said, pointing to the screen. The system was attempting to perform calculations on non-numerical data. A classic division by zero error. The engine was essentially asked to divide a number by a word, and the result was a catastrophic failure that cascaded everywhere. I paused, letting it land. "The system was fed digital garbage," I continued, using a metaphor I knew he'd understand. "It's like they tried to run a Formula One car by filling the tank with sand. The engine didn't just stop, it tore itself to pieces." Brenda finally spoke, her voice thin. "But how?" "The data was coming from the live API. The source isn't the issue," I explained patiently. "The issue is translation. Raw data from different sources is like a room full of people shouting in different languages. You need a translator." I looked from David to Brenda. It appears the core data normalization module, the Rosetta Stone, was bypassed. David's eyes narrowed. "Who made that change?" Checkmate. I didn't have to say a word. I typed a single command, git log, graph. The project's commit history appeared on the giant screen, a visual timeline of every change, every decision, every approval. The evidence was irrefutable and time-stamped. There, near the top, was Leo's commit, refactor, bypassing legacy normalization for direct data ingestion with Nova.js parser. And right below it, the nail in Brenda's professional coffin, a bright green line showing her name. "Brenda, Smith approved this pull request 6 days ago." And there, just below it, was my commit, the health check. My code hadn't caused the failure. My code was the smoke alarm that had started screaming when it detected the fire they had set. My hands were clean. I was the one who had tried to build in a safeguard. They were the ones who had dismantled the fire suppression system. I had simply provided the rope. They had eagerly fashioned their own noose. The silence that followed was absolute. Brenda stared at her name, glowing on the screen like a scarlet letter. The game was over. Her incompetence was laid bare, not by accusations, but by her own digital footprint. Brenda was fired. It wasn't quiet. She was walked out by security that same afternoon, her box of belongings a pathetic symbol of her downfall. She tried to build a career on buzzwords, and it crumbled under the first real pressure test. Leo, the intern, was a pawn in her game, and everyone knew it. He was quietly reassigned to the IT help desk to live out his internship resetting passwords. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. And me? I was given a battlefield promotion. Principal engineer with my own team and full autonomous control over Project Chimera. It came with a substantial raise and an even more substantial apology from David. They needed me to salvage the project, to fix their mess, and to try and resurrect the deal. The first thing I did was rip out the Nova.js abomination. I reconnected my Rosetta Stone. I restored Chimera to its former, elegant glory. 2 weeks later, I personally gave the demo to the clients. It ran flawlessly. We got the contract. Sometimes I think about Brenda, picturing her updating her LinkedIn, searching for another company where she can talk about synergy. I sit back in my new, larger office and watch my project, my empire, continue to grow. There's a certain satisfaction in proving a point. So, completely. The best revenge isn't loud and explosive. It's silent, surgical, and impeccably coded. I can't be the only one who's been underestimated at work or had their project handed to someone completely unqualified. What's the most blatant example of incompetence you've ever witnessed from a manager? Let me know your story in the comments below. And if you enjoy tales of corporate karma, be sure to like and subscribe for more. In the end, this was never about destroying something. It was about proving something. Brenda thought she could replace years of expertise with youthful enthusiasm and a flashy UI. She learned the hard way that in the world of technology, you can't fake competence. The machine knows. The code always knows.